Right. Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Sanhedrin Daf Samech Tes, and we're starting 4 lines from the bottom on Sameches Amud Beis. And yesterday we began a conversation about whether or not a katan is able to have children. So if you look 2/3 of the way down, the Gemara says in the name of Rav Chizah that katan sheholid ein beno nasa ben sora rumora. He spoke about his din within the framework of ben sora rumora. The halacha that Rav Chizah taught is that I know. Well, you should move forward. Come sit at my table. I know. Just don't spit on me. So the Gemara says that if a katan has a child, then because the child was of a katan, he therefore is not able to be a ben sora rumora. Very unique thing. Rav Chizda had a unique shita, and Rabba is not having it. Upliga de Rabba. Rabba argued. He says, Amar Rabba, katan ain't a molid. A katan is not someone who's capable of having children. This is going to be the discussion for the entire day as to whether or not, in halachic terms, a child, someone who is not yet a bar chiyuva, possibly, you have to see how old this child is, that they are not able to have children. Shene emar. Ein leish goel. This pasuk is talking about a case scenario where I stole something and I wanted to return it to the person, but the person died. Now I have to return it to a family member. What if the person is ein leish goel? What if the person to whom I have to return to, the nignav, what if he doesn't have any family members? So the Gemara says everybody has family members. I mean, keep going up. You exist from somewhere. There has to be some connection to some person who's a next of kin. Zero relatives? That's not possible. Ella, it must be begezel hager hakosav medaber. It must be that the pasuk is talking about a ger, and we'll see how this connects back to Rabbah and Rav Chizda. Amar Rachmana, the Torah says, and we're now on the top of Samach Tes Amud Aleph Ish. Isha tatzarech lachzer alav im yesh lo goalin v'im lav. When it comes to a ger, if he's a man, well, a man can have children, and therefore, even if he's a ger, while he may not have parents and may not have brothers, he does biologically, halachically. Ger shenis gairs kekatan shenola dami. So then, if that's true, then by him you have to search to see if he has goal and if he has relatives. But look at this line, and this is where Rabbah gets his energy from. Katan iyatatzarach lachzer lo biyadua she'ein lo goal. Rabbah says that when it comes to a ger katan, we know that a ger katan has no relatives. Why? Maybe he had a child. Elamai, it must be that a ger katan is not able to have children. A katan's not able to have children, and therefore Rabbah holds a katan can't have children against Rav Chizda, who holds that he can.
Children, those are not his children anymore, right?
Correct. That's correct. That wasn't even that's true, but that wasn't even what the Gemara. What you're saying, just in general, if a ger has children, yeah. But what we're talking about and what Rabbah was extracting from here is that a katan is not able to have children, because if he was able to have children, then in this case of the ger katan, we would have said, go see if he has children. But the pasuk doesn't say that. Only isha tatzarech lachzor alav. But a katan tatzarech lachzor alav biyadua she'ein lo goal, and a katan is not able to have children. Machlokas Rabbah and Rav Chizda. So the Gemara says, wait 1 second. Eis ve'abaye. The pasuk says ish. This pasuk is talking about a person who sleeps with a woman who is a shifcha necharefes leish. She's a maidservant who is actually tethered to another man. So it's kind of like cheating in some way. And says the Gemara, Ben tes shanim v'yom echad shiroi l'biyah. How do we know that a boy who's 9 years and 1 day that he's roi l'biyah? Tamalomar v'ish. Because it says, and a man. Amar le, yeshlo ve'enomo. That you're right that over there, that the ben tes shanim, that a child who's 9 is considered to have cohabited. It's true. So yeshlo, he does have tashmish hamita, but ve'eno molid. He's not capable of actually having children. He can have intercourse. There will be zera. Well, I should say more accurately, there will be semen, but no sperm. That's why he's able to cohabit. But there's no child that's gonna be born from that. Kitvua shelo hevia shlishtami. It's like grain that's only grown to 1/3. It just does a little bit of a mashal. And the Bechizkiya Tana, a similar idea. V'chiyazid ish. This pasuk's talking about injuring someone, but The Gemara says, Ish mezidu mazria. A man is mezidu mazria. This word mezid in this context, as we'll soon see, has to do with whether or not there is viable zera that is able to create a child. So Ish, a man is mezidu mazria, but ve'ein katan, mezidu mazria. A child is not able to be mezid. Literally, the word mezid in this context means to cook, but it means his body is not capable of developing zera. How would we know in this context that the word mezid speaks about bishul, that the word mezid speaks about cooking, or in context, the way we would understand it is that he's able to develop, to have a viable zera for children. The pasuk says, "Vayazed Yaakov Nazid." We see over there that Yaakov was making lentils. The story of Yaakov taking the bechorah, and over there in that scenario, we see the word Vayazed is cooking, and therefore Mezid over here teaches us that it is the body's process of making viable zera. So says the Gemara. Hold on one second. V'hatana de Rabbi Shmuel ben velo av. We had said that in regards to the pasuk of ben soreru moreh, we said that it is a ben, but not someone who is a father. A ben who is not a father. Heichidami. What was the case scenario? So ilema de iaber baser de aisish sairos. If there was a boy who impregnated a woman, but only after he had shtei sairos, the olid, and he gave birth mekame de lakiv zakon, before he grew a full pubic hair above the aver atashmish in the pubic area. So in that period of time, mi'ika shehus kulehai, no one can have a baby in that span of time because v'ha'amar Rav Kruspedoy kol yomav shel ben sora rumore einu el gimel chadashim bilvad. The amount of time between shtei sairos and the full zakan tachton, the full growth of pubic hair, says the Gemara, that's only 3 months. So what is the case scenario where we say that someone had a child, but he's not a father as it relates to Ben Sora Rumora? What is that frame? Elalab, it can't be that he impregnated her once he had shtei saros. Rather, it was the iaber mekame delaisi shtei saros, the olid mekame delakiv zakan. Maybe when he was, let's say that you get 2 hairs on your 13th birthday. So, no, they cohabited. They had a child that she got pregnant 7 months before. And in the 3-month period between shtei saros and lakiv zakan, they were able to have a child. But that means ushma mina katan molid. That means that a child is able to impregnate, that he has zera. So says the Gemara, no, that's not correct. Lo, and we're at the first of the long lines on Samach Tesman. Lo, olam de iaber basar da isi shtei saros. Really, he slept with her only after shtei saros, and really only a gadol is able to cohabit. A katan doesn't have viable zera, and ve'olid basar da akiv zakan, and really they gave birth. She gave birth after he was done with his ben sora mora case. Ayu de Kakashalach Rav Kruspedoy, who says that the whole period of ben sora mora is only gimel chadashim. Ki yasser Rav Dimi Amar, he said Amre b'ma'arava ben veloha roy likroso av. We're not talking about a case where he cohabited before he had shtei saros. He cohabited after. But when did he become a father? When she was hukra ubra. The Gemara is not super clear in its wording here, but that is what's going on. He's not just, he's nothing more than roi likros ben. Once he's roi likros ab, I should say. Once he's roi to be called a father, which is when hukra ubra, at that point he's no longer able to be a ben sora remora. So, with the shtei sairos, on that day, let's just make the case super clear. On that day, he cohabits with a woman and she gets pregnant on that day. They didn't have pregnancy tests. We do blood tests. We have pregnancy tests that are super accurate, relatively speaking. And therefore, how do we know when he's father? When someone sees his wife is pregnant. So then we say, okay, now he's in the category of an av. Now that he's in the category of an av, he's no longer shaykh to ben soreh rumoreh. So that's the machlok. What? That's the range of time. It's 3 months. Hukra ubra is a period of 3 months.
But I'm saying, like, just he can be a ben sora more,
only for 3 months.
But if she hasn't been showing, then
we wouldn't know. But
right.
The assumption was that by that point she's hukra ubra. It seems from the Gemara that the 3 months is an upper limit by when she'll show. She may show sooner, but we assume in halacha that 3 months is the measure hukra ubra. That's why we wait when a woman, let's say her husband passes away quickly, we have to wait a few months before she gets married because we don't want to be in a scenario where we don't know who the father is. Like that's not Gishmak. That's the same rule. Exactly right. It's correct. Exactly. So just about halfway down, this guy, you picked the hardest Masechta to remember something from.
It happened to be one of the easiest for me. Yevamos is where I understand.
That's not me. You should have given the shiur.
Right.
I did. I wouldn't let you. It's true. All right, 3 lines into the wide lines. The Gemara is now going to analyze this din of Gimel Chodashim. The Gemara says as follows. Gufa, Amar Rav Kruspedoi, Amar Rav Shabsai, Kol Yamav Shal Ben Sora Rumora Einu El Gimel Chodashim Bilvad, that the 3 months, the 3-month span from Shtei Saros to Lakiv Zakan until there is full pubic hair is how long. That's the range of possibility where a person can be paskined upon that he is a Ben Sora Rumora. How can that be? We said that the range of time is from when he shows Shtei Saros until Yakiv Zakan. But let's say it's 3 months and 20 days. Let's say it's 2 months and 1 day. We don't know exactly how long it is. It's not such a science that the final hair will grow on the 90th day. It's not like that. So says the Gemara, you're absolutely right. And the Gemara here is teaching us a kula, that we are actually keeping the range of Gimel Chodashim possibly even shorter. Here's how it works. Halfway down. Hikiv Zakan, if the boy, the young man, finishes growing pubic hair with, let's say a little bit earlier, Afal Gab de lo Malu Gimel Chadashim, even if he hasn't at the 3-month mark, let's say that he rapidly grows the pubic hair and it finishes at 2 months and 15 days, guess what? He's no longer eligible to be a Ben Sorah or Mora. It's a kula. It limits the frame in which he can become a Ben Sorah or Mora. And similarly, Malu Gimel Chadashim, let's say 3 months hit, Afal Gav de lo Hikiv. Let's say he's not growing hair very rapidly. So on January 1st, he grows Shtei Saros, and then February, March, April 1st hits, that's 3 months, but he hasn't finished growing the Zakan Tachton. We'll still say that he's no longer able to be a Ben Sorah or Mora. And here, what the Gemara is doing is teaching us a kula. We'll never go more than 3 months, and we will possibly end the frame of him being a Ben Sorah or Mora even sooner. We're never going to go longer than that, but it might even be shorter, and that is a kula because it makes it even more difficult for a person to be paskined upon that he's a Ben Sorah or Mora. Then the Gemara points out something very, very interesting. What did we just say? 3 months. 3 months or maybe a little bit shorter. But we have a problem because one of the things that we've seen in Shas before is that there are 2 types of gestational periods. One is 9 months to deliver, and one is 7 months. The Gemara says elsewhere, I don't remember where, maybe it's in Yevamos, maybe Mark can recall it. Pasha. Yeah. The Gemara says that 7 months is a normal birth, a normal gestational period, and 9 months is normal, but not 8. So the Gemara says, Yasiv Rav Yaakov minahar pekod kame de Ravina. Rabbi Yaakov was sitting in front of Ravina. Yasiv v'ka'amar mishmei de Rav Huna brei de Rav Yoshua. And he quotes from Rav Huna. Shma miname de Rav Kruspedoi. He says in the name of Rav Kruspedoi, Amar Rav Shabsai, Yoledes l'shiva, that if there is a woman whose gestational period is 7 months, ein ubra nikar l'shlish yameha. Now, a third of 7 months is not 9 months. It's 2 point whatever. It's a shorter amount of time. If it were to be true that a woman, even in a 7-month gestational period, would be seen at 3 months, at a third of her pregnancy, lama li gimel. Why would it be the Rav Kruspedoi would say that Ben Sorah Rumora was a 3-month span? After all, betray v'tilsa sagya. If a woman's pregnancy is 7 months and hukra ubra is a third of that time, so then why did Rav Kruspedoi say that a Ben Sorah Rumora has a 3-month possibility? It should have been 2 1/3 months, which is a third of 7. So the Gemara says, Amar le le'olam emalach ubra nikar l'shlish yameh. You're right. I agree with you that a third of 7, that if a woman had a gestational period of 7 months, that a third would be 2 1/3 months, and maybe her baby would show at that point. But zil basar ruba, we follow most women, and most women have a normal gestational period of 9 months. And therefore, we still say 9 months. Now, that's a chumrah, because perhaps we could have said that since some women are 7 months, maybe we should say that instead of saying that Ben Sora Remora is 3 months, maybe it's 2 1/3 months, because some women have 7 months gestational period. So the Gemara says, don't worry, we follow the rove, and the rove of women have gestational periods of 9 months. So the Gemara says 2/3 of the way down, just about halfway down in the wide lines. Amar Lahu Uvadinin Efashos Miazlin and Basa Ruba. You're going to follow Rove and kill this child? You're going to kill the Ben Sora Rumora? If let's say that he became a Ben Sora Rumora at 2 2/3 of a month, 2 months and 2/3. That's within the span of 3 months. But maybe his mother had a gestational period of 7 months, in which case it's two, maybe his wife, I should say, and in which case it's 2 1/3 months and not 3, but you have 2 2/3, you killed him. That's a big chumrah. Perhaps his wife only had a 2 1/3 gestational period. So says the Gemara, do we really follow Dini Nefashos? Do we really follow Rov in such a case? And here we learn this in another frame, where basically we're supposed to be super strict about trying to save people. How can you say that? We should have been Mekil and said that some gestational periods are 2 1/3. And we should have made the possible range of when a person can be paskined as a Ben Sora or Mora. We shouldn't have said it was 3 like Rav Kruspedoy. We should have said it was 2 1/3, because after all, some gestational periods are 7 months. Mora says, Ahadrua Kami de Rabino. They brought this response back to Rabino. Amarle, he said, we follow Rov all the time. And the Gemara gives a perfect example of this, one that we learned not too long ago on Daf Mem. Votnan. Let's say that we were grilling the Eidim B'drisha B'chakira, right? A guy's about to be put to death, and the two of you, we have Tex and Mark, who are the Eidim. Echad Omer B'shnayim B'chodesh. Mark says it was Beis in the Jewish month. Echad Omer B'gimel. Tex says no, it's on Gimel of the Jewish month. What's the halacha? Edusan kayames. We say that the testimony is still valid. Now, how could it be that if you say Beis Adar and you say Gimel Adar that the testimony is still valid? Because we have this thing called an Ibra Chodesh, we have we're Makadesh the Chodesh. Mark knows the halachos and Tex doesn't, so he's off by a day. He's just not used to being Ma'aber the Chodesh. He's not familiar with it. Shezeh Yodea Be'iburo Shel Chodesh. V'zeh Eino Yodea. So what are we left with? Okay, so one of these guys is a bigger Talmud Chacham than the other. But to say Beis in the month and Gimel, I watched the guy kill on Beis, and you say you watched the guy kill on Gimel, that's not enough to ruin the Edus. Now, B'Isal Kedaitach Lo Amrin an Zil Basaruba. If you want to say we don't follow a rove, then when Tex and Mark disagree, Neima Habedavka Kamisade Ve'akhu Shehu de Makrishei Adade. If we don't follow the rove, then Tex was being exacting when he said Gimel B'chodesh, and Mark was being exacting when he said Beis. That should be a hakrasha. But we don't say that. We accept that edus, even though it's not the same data. There's day off. Why? Because rove people don't know how to be ma'aber the chodesh. Most people don't know how to do the math. And because most people don't know how to do the math, we do put the guy to death. We accept the testimony. And if the testimony is accepted, the guy is killed. We accept Rov all the time, says Ravina. Elalav says the Gemara, Mishum Damrina and Zil Basaruba, the Ruba the Inshi, Avde, the Tobi Ibur the Archa. Thank God it's not just us. Most people in their era did not know how to be Ma'aber the Chodesh. And yes, we do accept Rov when it comes to Dine Nefashos. Amar Rav Yirmi Midifti Afananami. Tanina, we have a similar idea. Bas Shalosh Shana V'Yom Echad. We have a girl who's 3 years and 1 day. Now, this was Rivka, right? The Torah tells us that Rivka married at 3. Well, the Torah doesn't say that, but we do the math. Rivka married at 3. There's only one problem. There is no Kiddushin if the woman is an islandess, if she's sterile. And you won't know that in the beginning, right? It takes time to figure that out. Yet, even though we don't know if she's an islandess, what does the Gemara say? That if a man marries this woman, miskadeshes bebia, she can be married. We know from the beginning of Maseches Kiddushin that bekesef shtar and bia you can get married. Halacha lemaisa, we don't allow for that to happen nowadays. V'im ba leha yavam kina. A yavam, if she is the one standing, she's the sister, she's the wife of Ruvain. Ruvain died, so Shimon can marry her even at the age of 3. And with Tashmish Amita, then halachically they're married, as we learned in Yevamos. Tashmish Amita is what creates the kinyan of marriage. The Zika creates the marriage between the Yavam and the Yavama. And if she's married and another man cohabits with her, that man will be put to death. Right? He's chayav mishum eshasish. Umetame is boala. And even though she's only 3, if she happens to be a nida, then again, she doesn't have a menstrual cycle, but if she happened to see enough blood that makes her a nida, then she's metame her husband, mida oraisa, metame mishkav hatachton ke'elyon. This we've seen in Shas a few times, a reference to a higher level of tuma instead of a lower level of tuma, not for now. Nises lekohen, if this girl, this 3-year-old, in one day married a kohen, she could eat truma, ocheles betruma. Well, echad min apsu and pasta min kahuna. If someone who's not supposed to sleep with her sleeps with her, so then a goy, whatever the case may be, then pasta min kahuna, then she can no longer marry a kohen. What? What?
You said a guy?
Yeah.
Be anybody, doesn't be a guy, right?
No, it's dafka psulin. Balachad min apsulin. That's what Rashi says. Kigon kusi chalal nasin umamzer. They made her a chalala.
Right, but it's not a guy.
Kusi is a goy.
Yeah, but a mamzer is not a guy.
Yeah, it's a group of people. Yeah, he's one example. The guy is one example. Rashi gives a whole bunch of examples. So in such a case, she's psula. What?
That's why we have Rashi.
Correct.
You
You can challenge all you want. I love it. In those cases, pasla min kahuna. Lastly, if somebody sleeps with her, a family member, whatever the case may be, that man will sleep with her and he'll get killed and she won't. Why won't she get killed? Because she's a child. The Amai asks the Gemara on the top of Samach Tesamid base, I don't understand any of this. If we're saying that there's a chance that that this marriage was a 0, then no one should be killed, right? Says the Gemara, Ema island is he. Maybe we should say that down the road she might be sterile, she might be an island, she can't have children. And therefore the marriage wasn't good, and therefore no one should die, and therefore none of the things that happened in the brisa that we just read should be true. Says the Gemara, we see over here yet again a second source that indicates that we follow Rov even in cases of Dina Nefashos. Yes, we put people to death based on Rov all the time. And we need a compelling reason to assume that there's a Rov that we won't rely upon. But in general, we do rely upon Rov. Says the Gemara, no, that's not correct. The Gemara says, lo, that's not true. It's not that we follow Rov. My chayev aleha diktani. When the brisa below said that a man who cohabits with a young girl who's 3 years and 1 day that he's chayev, that didn't mean chayev misa. It meant korban. No, it's just talking about it. It's just not chayev misa. Says the Gemara, I don't know if you can read Hebrew because the brisa says black on white. V'ha momsen al yadak tani. It says we're going to kill someone. I don't even understand the having of the Gemara. So it's black on white that's true. Says the Gemara, you're right. Yeah, you're right. What did we mean over there when we said that chayav aleha? That wasn't talking about other people. It was talking about the father who was very inappropriate with his child. Chas v'shalom. Chas v'shalom. B'va lehavia. Where the father was with her, he'd be chayav. It's not just the father. It's anyone who's begeder arayos would be in this category that we would kill. Says the Gemara, maybe we have no raya from here that we follow Rov. Perhaps in this case, the Kibla Ilave. Maybe you're right that we don't say Rov. But this husband said, I'm going to marry you even though you're an islandess. And when he said that, then we don't have to rely on a Rov. And if we don't have to rely on a Rov, then perhaps it's true that we don't put people to death based on Rov. Now, that's not the conclusion of our Gemara in general, but that is the conclusion of this one aspect of the Gemara. In regards to other inappropriate relationships, Tanu Rabbanon, Hamisoleles, if you have a mother who is being a prutza, not my word, that's Rashi's word. Rashi, 5 lines down, Dibra Hamaskal Hamisoleles, Lashon Pritzos, and it's Misoleles in the feminine. If you have a woman who's being an inappropriate bibna, and with her son has a kishui, and bibna katan veheraba, and there's partial penetration. We don't know that we've discussed the details of that in other sugyas. Does that mean actually nichnas to the goof, or just mean that the two body parts touch? So that's a discussion in another Masechta. But anyways, the Gemara says that if a mother's inappropriate with her son and there is ha'ara, there's some partial penetration, Beishamai omrim paslamina kahuna. That's it. That makes her psula to kahuna because she did something very wrong. Ubeis hillel machshirin. What is this debate all about? So it says the Gemara as follows, and we're 8-9 lines down on Samach Testament base. Amar Rav Chia Berei de Rabba Bar Nachmeni Amar Rav Chizda. So that's one flow of what it could have been in the name of Rav Chia. Ve'amrei lo Amar Rav Chizda Amar Zeiri. Hakol modim. Everyone agrees that had this mother been inappropriate with a boy who was beben teisha shana b'yom echad should be also bia. Everyone agrees. A boy who's 9 and up, that's considered bia. Can he have children? That was the previous sugya. Machlokes Rav Chizda and Rabba. But here we're debating whether they have the capacity for tashmish hamita. So everyone agrees that the tashmish hamita of a 9-year-old is real, and he would passel the mother from kahuna if they even had hara. Everyone also agrees, says the Gemara, that pachos mi ben shmona, that if the child is younger than 8, namely 7 and down, we don't know about 8 yet, we'll discuss that in a minute, but 7 and down, she'ein bia so bia, so a 7-year-old boy, that's not bia at all. The only machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, lo nechleku ela beben shmona, when a boy is in the age bracket of 8, from 8 in 1 day to 8 in 364 days or 365 days, says the Gemara, in that case, the Beis Shammai savre gamrinan midoros harishonim, as we'll soon see with quite a bit of mathematical complexity. We'll see in the lines that follow that there were 8-year-olds who had children back in the day, in the times of David, and Ubeis Hillel savre lo gamrinan midoros harishonim. So Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are asking, can we learn back to a time when it was much more common for children to have children? So if an 8-year-old is having a child in the times of David, can we apply that to the times of the Tanaim when Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? That's a machlokes, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says the fact that it happened in the times of David doesn't mean that it can happen now. And when it comes to Beis Shammai said, Beis Shammai says, because it happened in the times of David, we know that an 8-year-old can have a child now. And Beis Hillel says no. Beis Hillel says no, we don't do that. The fact that it was true then is not necessarily true now.
Did it happen once, or this was a regular occurrence back then?
It was much more of a regular occurrence. Well, we're going to see 2 different episodes.
How long did people live for back then?
I don't know. I should know this. I don't know how long David lived for.
But was 70.
What? Yeah.
70. He died at
Yeah,
70?
good Bekias. So David Shlomo had a great-grandfather who was 33 when he was 7. So that means Shlomo was born at 26. We're going to see this in a minute, but Shlomo was born at 26. Shlomo was born when his grandfather was 26. He was the great-grandson. So that means that minus the pregnancies, every 8 years they had kids. That's the raya, which we're about to get to right now.
The same lunar schedule and everything that we have.
Yeah. Time did not lapse. Yeah, it was regular clock. Yeah. The Ramban asks that question in regards to Sheishes Yimei Breishis.
Right. Well,
are they actually 24-hour days? The Ramban says yes, they were 24-hour days. Nisim b'ni flows, but that's what he says. They were real days. So these 2 were real days. So this is
the same conversation of the people who lived to 900 years back then. Is that 24-hour days?
It's 24-hour days. According to the Ramban, yeah. But the Ramban's question was really only in regards to Sheishes Yimei Breishis. I don't know if he applied that question to later generations. Last of the short lines. The Doros Harishonim Minalan De'olid. How do we know, says the Gemara, that the earlier generations could have children at the age of 8? And there are 6 or 7 psukim in a row, and I will summarize them at the end. Halozos bas Sheva bas Eliam Eshes Uriah Chiti. Bas Sheva's father was Eliam. That's pasuk number 1. Pasuk 2, Eliam ben Achitofel Hagiloni. Eliam's father was Achitofel. Let's get it correct. Achitofel was the grandfather. Eliam was the father. Bathsheba was the daughter. And Shlomo was Bathsheba's son. So Achitofel and Shlomo was great-grandfather and great-grandson. V'chsi vayishlach b'yad nasan hanavi vayikra es shemo Yedidya ba'avor ki Hashem ohavo. This, we're not going to get into all the story now, but Nasan Navi was getting involved. This was when a lot of the battles were happening in regards to who was going to be king and Avshalom. It was a whole mess. Uchsi vayhi lishnasayim yomim vayu gozazim v'Avshalom. Uchsi v'Avshalom barach vayilach geshura vayisham shalosh shanim. Uchsi vayeshev Avshalom Yishalayim shnasayim yomim upnei hamelech lo ra'a. Uchsiva vayhi miketzar boim shana. After 40 years, Vayomer Avshalom al Melech El Chana va'Ashalama es nidaresh or nadarti l'Hashem b'Chebron. Avshalom's making a run for the Malchus. Uchsiv, at this point, Achitophel, who actually rebelled against David in the end, Achitophel basically said, so he saw that his advice wasn't going to win. And he loaded up the donkey, and he killed himself. So it's important to pay attention to the math here. Achitophel killed himself. So it says the Gemara, people who have blood on their hands and trickery, they don't live half of their lives. So the Pasuk in Tehillim says that a person typically lives to 70. What's half of 70? 35. The Tanya, kol shnosav shel doeg einon ela shloshim ve'arba, v'shal Achitophel eino ela shloshim v'shalosh. Oh, so Achitophel died at 33 with great-grandchildren. Okay? We know people who aren't married yet. This is 3 generations from Achitophel. Kama havya lahu tzlasim v'tzlas. How old was he when he died? Achitophel, the great-grandfather, was 33. When he died, how old was David? Based on the math and the psukim, which we skipped over the details, but based on the math and the psukim, he was 7. So that means that David was born at 33 minus 7. So 33 dal sheva dahava Shlomo. Shlomo was 7. Pashlahu esrim v'shis, which means that Achitophel was 26. Dal tarte shnei litzlasa ibure. We can remove approximately 2 years, 24 months, for 3 pregnancies. No, not back-to-back, they're generational. So, meaning Achitophel got married and had his child Eliam. Eliam got married, his wife got pregnant, and they had Bathsheba. Bathsheba got married, and she got pregnant and had Shlomo. So when you look at the 3 pregnancies, that shows us that we lose about 3 years of his 26 years, because we said that Shlomo was born when his great-grandfather Achitophel was 26. So if you do that, then ishtakach the kol chad b'chad b'tamni olid. Then what you end up with is he was 26. When he was 26 and became a great-grandfather, 3 of those years were pregnancy, which means he was 24, which means if you do the math, the earliest amount of time it could have been was 8 times 3. What does that show us? That an 8-year-old can have a child. That's why Beis Shammai said that the 8-year-old, where the mother's inappropriate with the 8-year-old, and there's ha'ara, there's partial penetration, that she's psula l'kahuna. Because we know from Achitophel and from Shlomo and from those generations that an 8-year-old can have a child. So says the Gemara, Mimai, how do you know that it was an even 8 years in between each generation? Dilma tarvaihu b'teisha olidu b'sheva olidu b'shis mishum de'itzabaria. Maybe it wasn't that way. Maybe it was 9 years old when Achitophel had Eliam. Eliam was 9 years old when he had Bathsheba, but because Bathsheba is a girl and girls develop faster than men, maybe she had a baby at 6. In which case, the math works out great. 9 plus 9 is 18, plus 6 is 24. Perfection. And perhaps that's the case, but boys cannot have children at the age of 8, and perhaps Hillel is right. Says the Gemara, Teda, you should know, Vlad meikara. We actually know that this is correct, because before they had Shlomo, David and Bathsheba's first union yielded a baby that died. That means that she was already having kids, according to any math equation, before the age of 8. Had to be. So that's how the Gemara proves that it is at least a possibility. Anyways, answer number 2 to this question, because answer number 1 did not really hold up. Ela mehacha. Ela told us Terach holid es Avram. Es Avram es Nachor ve'es Haran. Now, Avraham married Haran's daughter, Sarah / Yiska. We'll get back to that in a moment. Now, if the pasuk is in age order of Avram, then Nachor, then Haran, Avram gadol minachor shana. Avram was the oldest. He was 1 year older than Nachor. V'Nachor gadol meharan shana. Nimsa Avram gadol shtei shana meharan. Avram was 2 years older than his youngest brother of Haran. Uchsi vayikach Avram v'Nachor lahem nashim. That they got married. Avram and Nachor got married. V'amar Rav Yitzchak Yiska zu Sarah. V'lama nikra shma Yiska. Why is Yiska? Is, by the way, the Torah. This is the name Jessica in biblical terminology. It's from the word Yiska. It's fascinating, actually. Who knew that Jessica is a biblical name? It doesn't sound very biblical. It sounds very secular American. But the Gemara over here says that Yiska was, in fact, Sarah. V'lama nikra shma Yiska. Why did she have the name Yiska? Shesocha b'ruach HaKodesh. She was able to see with Ruach HaKodesh. She had some type of divinity. She had the capacity to see b'ruach HaKodesh. That's why the Torah says that Hashem tells Avram, Kol asher tomar lecha Sarah shma b'kola. You got to listen to her. Whatever she says, she knows what she's talking about. Some women have taken this Gemara to say, Avram was a good... No, she had Ruach HaKodesh. Unless you have Ruach HaKodesh, sweetheart, I don't have to listen to you. So, okay, don't repeat that at all. That's what the Gemara says, that she had Ruach HaKodesh. That's why she had the name Yiska. And Davar Achar, Yiska she'akol sachin b'yofia. Everyone was looking at her. She was just a beautiful person. She was a very beautiful woman, and people would stare at her. Uchsiv, the pasuk says, "Vayapel Avraham al pana, vayitzchak vayomer belibo." Kama kashish Avram misara. How much older was Avraham than Sarah? Eser shnin. Okay, but we do. The kashish me'avua tarten shnin, but Avram was only 2 years older than her father. Ishtakach ki olda Haran l'Sara b'tamne olida. Says the Gemara, must be that Haran had Sarah when he was 8. The Haraya, like Beis Shammai, that the Doros Harishonim were able to have children at the age of 8. Says the Gemara, Mimai. That's only true if the pasuk is in age order of Avraham, Nachor, and Haran. Dilma Avram Zuta da'achuahaba. Maybe he was the younger brother. And perhaps the pasuk that says Avram, Nachor, and Haran was actually V'derech Chochmasan Kacha Shivlu, just who was the biggest Talmud Chacham. After all, we have precedents for this. Teta de Kacha Shivlu Kra Derech Chochmasan. Techsivahi ben Noach Chamesh Me'oshan. V'yolad Noach es Shem Escham ve'es Yafes. Now, says the Gemara, Shem Gadol Mecham Shana. If you want to say that this is an age order, then Shem's older than Cham by a year, V'cham Gadol Yefesh Shana, Nimsa Shem Gadol Yefesh Te Shanim. It seems that Shem is older than his youngest brother by 2 years, but that doesn't work. Uchsiv, the pasuk says, V'nach ben Sheish Me'os Shana ve'amabul haya mayim ala aretz. It says that Noach was 600 years old. Uchsiv ve'ela toldos Shem. Shem ben Me'as Shana. Shem was 100. And Vayolad es Arpachshad Shnosayim Achar Hamabul. That 2 years after the Mabul, he had Arpachshad. How could he be Ben Mea Shana? It should have been Bar Mea V'Tartin Shnin Haba. He should have been 102 according to the Torah's math, not 100. Elamai, it must be that the pasuk was not an age order. In our case too, it wasn't an age order. Again, no proof to Beis Shammai that the Doros Harishonim had children at the age of 8. Amar Rav Kahana, Amrisa l'shmaisa kamid Rav Zvid min Arda. This whole story about the Mabul, about how we know whether or not the Psukim follow age order or Chashivus was brought in front of Rav Zvid. Amar le'atu mehacha masni. So that's how you learn it. But ve'ana mehacha masni Allah. We learn it from somewhere else. So Hashem yulad gamhu avi kol b'nei ever achi yefes hagadol yefes hagadol shebe'achiv haya. The pasuk says, that's clear, super clear. That Yefes was the older, Shem Cham Yafes. You went through a whole mathematical gymnastics. We didn't need to do that. The pasuk says that Yefes was the bigger brother. So we therefore see that it was Derech HaShivus that the pasuk referred to their name. Shem was the greatest, Shivas Shem. Shem Cham Yafes, and therefore Yafes was really the oldest. Elaminolan, let's try again in regards to how we know that an 8-year-old could possibly have a child. And then we're going to stop just 2 lines from the bottom of the page. Says the Gemara Mehacha. Uvitzalel ben Uri ben Chur lamata Yehuda. Here's our first 3 generations. We have Bitzalel, whose father was Uri, whose father was Chur, and they're part of Shevet Yehuda. So we have 3 generations right now. And Uchsiva Tamas Azuva Eshes Kalev. Azuva was the name of the wife of Kalev. Vayikach lo Kalev es Ephras vateled es Chur. In this pasuk we see that Chur was the child of Caleb, of Kalev. So we have Kalev, Hur, Uri, Betzalel. Kalev was the great-grandfather of Betzalel. And v'chi obad Betzalel Mishkan bar kamahabe. How old was Betzalel when he was working on the Mishkan? Bar Tlesar. He had to be at least 13. How do we know? Dechsiv ish ish mimalachto asher hema usim. You have to be an ish. So Betzalel must have been 13. Vitanya, and we have another brisa over here. Shana Rishona Asa Moshe Mishkan. In the first year, Moshe made the Mishkan. Shnia Hekim Mishkan v'shalach meraglim. In the second year, he built the Mishkan and he established the Mishkan. He was making the Mishkan and he sent the Meraglim. Uchsi ben arboim shana anochi b'shalach Moshe eved Hashem. He was 40 when he was sent to go to the Meraglim. Ve'ata hine anochi ayom ben chamesh u'shmonim shana. And at that point in the pasuk he was 85. Kamahavi lahu arbain. He was 40 at that time. Dal arbesar dahabe Betzalel. At that time, Betzalel was 14. So that means that his father was 40, his great-grandfather was 40, so we have Kalev was 40, and his great-grandson Betzalel was 14. If we go back to when Betzalel was born, 14 years earlier, 40 minus 14 is 26, that is how old Kalev was when he became a great-grandfather. He was 26 years old. Same math as before. Pashalu Esrim Mashis, Dal Tarte Shnei Zitzlasa Ibure. Of the 26 years he was alive, 2 of those years was approximately 3 pregnancies. Ishtakach Kolchad Vichad Betamne Oli. And it seems that from the time that Betzalel was born, it's clear that the previous 24 years was 3 generations of people. And unlike the story with David and Bathsheba, where Bathsheba was a female and could have had a child earlier, these are all men, because it's Kalev, and then Hur, and then Uri and Betzalel. And if Betzalel was just born, and the great-grandfather Kalev was 26, and we subtract the 2 years of pregnancy for when Hur was born, and when Uri was born, and when Betzalel was born, that means he's 24, which means 8 years old is a viable age to have a child. This Gemara seems to conclude by strengthening the Shita of Beis Shammai to say that if a woman was misolelis bivna, which is where our sugya started on the top of the page, a woman was very inappropriate with her son, and there was ha'ara, there was some degree of partial contact between his aver and her makom hatoref, we would say she's psula l'kahuna based on this Gemara. We see that 8 years is enough for a child to have a child. Stop right here. Mirza Hashem will pick up tomorrow night at these 2 dots at the bottom of the page. Wishing you all a beautiful night.